Well, good morning, everyone. This is Lowell Ann. I'm the moderator of the Being Your Own CEO Mastermind Hangout. And this morning, we're going to be doing something just a little bit different from what our usual is. But I just wanted to remind everyone what this hangout is all about. It's really about colleagues and business colleagues coming together in a mastermind concept that allows us to participate in a forum for giving and receiving support, enacting positive change, removing stumbling blocks, and creating stepping stones. So my name is Lowell Ann Fulsang. And this morning we are recording this session because we felt that this topic was or should be of great interest to solo entrepreneurs. It's something that we need to have a really good handle on if we're going to be promoting our businesses online, etc. So this morning I've invited Larry Earnhart to give us a presentation. He has done quite a bit of research around this whole anti-spamming legislation. And so I want to really thank you, Larry, for being ready to do this with us. And why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, thanks, Lowell Ann. I appreciate you inviting me into our talk here, and this anti-spam legislation that has come up, it's actually been around since 2010, and it's just taking effect now. And when I've asked people about it, nobody really knows anything about it. It hasn't been really promoted very well, and it's something that if you do email solicitations, if you're doing business by email, it will affect your business. And as you'll find out, the penalties for non-compliance can be pretty high. So it's something that it's better that you don't just ignore it, and it's better to make sure you're in compliance than to be caught unawares by it and end up with a hefty fine just because you didn't think that it was worth paying attention to. So what I'd like to do is I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'd like to show everybody, and then afterwards we'll do some questions. If people joining in online would like to send in some text message questions, then we'll be happy to go through them and answer them. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully giving people some information about this subject. It's a little dry, I admit, but we'll try to make it a little bit interesting for folks.
So for anyone watching us from outside, on the event page, there's a place where you can enter your questions if you have any. And I'll be looking over at my other screen periodically to see whether there are any questions, and we'll bring them in. So again, thank you for being prepared to do this, Larry, and let's take it away.
All right. Well, I'm going to flip the screen over to my PowerPoint presentation here, and we'll take it from there. Okay. So the legislation is called the Canada Anti-Spam Legislation, abbreviated CASL. The U.S. has its own version called CAN-SPAM, so there may be some confusion there. And there are some differences between the two legislations. So I won't really go into them in detail, but I'm going to be talking about what the legislation does to us here in Canada and how we need to respond to it. So we all use email marketing in some fashion. Many of us do extensive email marketing. It's inexpensive, it's easy to do, it reaches our customers, our prospective customers, and we use it for content marketing, sales, promotions, and just basic information with people as well. It is effective. A study done even now, even though social media has taken effect here, it's 40 times more effective still than using Facebook or Twitter as far as reaching your customers. However, But even in 2013, a study showed that 70% of all email was spam. Now, we do have spam filters. Most of our spam is filtered out as long as we're using some kind of spam filter for our email, but it's still a big problem. And another issue is that 1 out of 25 of those messages contain malicious attachments. Farming, phishing, software that just unloads itself into your computer and turns it into a spam bot, that sort of thing. So how do we go about preventing emails or spam, unwanted emails or spam? First of all, there's Canada's Anti-Spam Act that was just enacted. It just takes effect on July 1st of 2014. And we'll come back to this in a little bit. The Canada Anti-Spam Act, it states that it is designed to prevent unwanted, unsolicited electronic messages out of Canadians' electronic inboxes while allowing e-commerce to continue. That's their stated purpose for this. What it does, it prohibits sending commercial electronic messages, which we'll define shortly, without the recipient's consent. And these are messages that are sent to email addresses and social networking accounts and text messages sent to a cell phone. It prohibits alteration of transmission data in an electronic message, which results to it being delivered to a different destination. It prohibits installation of computer programs without the consent of the owner. It prohibits use of false or misleading representations in promotion of products or services. It also prevents the collection of personal information through accessing a computer system. And it prohibits collection of electronic addresses called address harvesting. And you may have seen this where there are programs or there's email that comes in and it'll collect your email address book and send it on to someone else, sometimes maliciously. So the effective dates, as I said, anti-spam takes effect July 1st of this year, 2014. The part that says no installation of computer programs, unsolicited installation, is 6 months, January 15th of 2015. And then something called private right of action takes effect July 1st, 3 years from now, in 2017. So private right of action is very important because normally in a situation like this, say with the do not call list for telephones, you make a complaint to the government body. And initially that's what we do, is if somebody is upset about getting spam, they make a complaint to the government body and then they will investigate. When private right of action takes effect, that means that people, individuals, can directly sue a company for what they consider violations. It means there's the possibility of class action lawsuits and possible punitive penalties as well involved in this. So this is a very serious issue because if even if you're, as far as you know, doing the right thing, a disgruntled customer or somebody who just plain doesn't like you can sue you. And hopefully not frivolously. Hopefully these won't occur, but sometimes that is a possibility. Now, the government bodies responsible for this, the main one is the CRTC, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, the Competition Bureau, and the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. The last one is involved with an amended PIPEDA, Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act. So they have changed the PIPED Act in order to accommodate the anti-spam as well. So why should you care about this? Does it matter? Well, there are some heavy penalties. There's criminal charges, civil charges, there's personal liability for company officers and directors, and the penalties can go up to $1 million for individuals and $10 million for businesses. So, okay, I have a small business, who's going to come after me? But to be honest with you, even if you have a $1,000 penalty or a $10,000 penalty, that's pretty serious. And it's not something that you really want to have attached to you. Now, other countries send spam, and we send spam to other countries, not us personally, but there are people here. So anybody who sends a message to a place outside of Canada, initially there was a double jeopardy clause where it would violate the laws here, but they changed it so any messages that are considered spam outside of Canada falls under the laws of those countries. Inbound messages coming into Canada must adhere to the CASL rules, even if it's from the US or China or whoever. And there are reciprocal agreements with the G20 countries. The G20 countries are the top 20 economic countries in the world, which Canada is one of. Now the question would be, will those laws be effective? You know, and that's one of the concerns. They're doing things with these laws that will take effect, that will affect Canadians, but is everybody else in the world just going to be laughing about this? So as far as how penalties are assessed, the system is complaint driven. Individuals can make complaints to the governmental bodies, and then once an investigation is done, a company will be sent a non-compliance letter, if they're not in compliance, with a fine attached. The fines generated can be per occurrence. So every single email sent out that does not comply with the act can engender a fine or penalty. And since some people send out hundreds, thousands, millions of emails, that can add up pretty quickly. So how does the system work? What are we supposed to do here? A commercial electronic message is a message whose purpose is to encourage participation in a commercial activity, and it's sent to an electronic address. In other words, you're selling something, and it doesn't have to mean that it's a profitable activity. It just means that you are trying to get somebody to buy into something, to sign up for something that is a commercial type of action. An electronic address is an email account, a cell phone number, an IM account, what they call any similar account, meaning Twitter, Facebook, or other social media. It does not apply to non-commercial activity, which we'll go over shortly. It does not apply to voice, fax, or recorded calls, robocalls, and it does not apply to broadcast messages, including tweets and blog posts. Now, I'm assuming that when they say that they don't mean that they're referring to tweets and blog posts that are not solicitations in and of themselves. There are exemptions. Charitable and political advertising is exempt, so we can still get spammed by our charities and our politicians. Phone messages are covered under the do not call regulations, and again, charitable and political entities are allowed to make calls even if you're on the do not call list. Now, is your message exempt? Your message can be exempted if you have a personal relationship with the recipient and you've had direct voluntary two-way communication. I'll talk about this in a little bit. It may be exempt if you have a family relationship with the recipient, which is defined, a family relationship is defined as going up through the grandparent level. So you can spam your family all you want, if you so desire. But if the recipient opts out, you still have to comply. You still have to stop sending them exemptions. So if your grandparents say, please don't spam me anymore, you really have to stop doing it. Consent is not required for what's called non-solicitation activity, which includes quotes or estimates, confirming transactions, warranty, recall, safety information, purchase, subscription, membership accounts, loans, things like that, employment relationships, delivery of a product or good or service, which makes sense. I mean, you're not asking for an order here. You're not soliciting something. It's continuing. It's finishing something that was already started. So an example of when consent would not be required in a message. In message A, you see it says it's about an account statement. We shipped your order of 25,000 deluxe widgets. Please pay the bill, or if not, we'll impose a surcharge. And then what I circled there is visit our website for an exciting new line of mini widgets. That's acceptable. A small amount of solicitation in a message is okay without having consent. However, in this message B, even though it's still labeled your account statement, if you read through, you find that the bulk of the message is about a solicitation. And there's one line saying, oh, by the way, your order's been filled and will be delivered. That would be considered a solicitation, and that you would have to have consent for before you send it. Okay, so what do you do? What's the point? You must have documented consent before you send a solicitation message. And what that means is you can't ask for the consent in your solicitation message. And in the past, we've been able to do this. We've been able to say, get a mailing list and send out email to people and say, you know what, I'd like you to sign up for my newsletter. I'd like you to sign up for my new consulting program or coaching program. And please please opt in. Please call me back or please email me back and we'll set you up with this. Can't do that anymore. So what has to be in each message? First of all, you have to identify yourself. You have to say your name or your business name. It also has to include a physical address for your business and a second location such as a website URL. There has to be a method where the recipient can readily contact you, usually by return email. It has to have a working unsubscribe mechanism that's functional for at least 60 days after it's sent. It has to be at no cost to the person, and it should be via electronic address or link, return email or a link. It also must be processed without delay. You have a maximum of 10 days to take this person off your list. Now, who can you contract? There are two types of consent called express consent and implied consent. Now it gets a little complicated. For some reason, the Canadian government decided that they wanted to be very specific about what's going on. And in fact, of the G20 nations, first of all, Canada is the last of the G20 nations to implement an anti-spam system, and it's also the most complex and the most far-reaching of all of them. So express consent means that you have a specific, unambiguous okay. Somebody has said, yes, I want to receive your email solicitations. And you have proof. To obtain express consent, you have to describe the purpose for requesting consent, what it is that you're selling. You have to provide the name, organization seeking consent, and if you're doing this for someone else, say you're an advertising or marketing firm, you have to identify who it is that you're selling for. You have to provide contact information, and such as a mailing address, and a telephone number, email address, or website address. And you have to indicate that the recipient can unsubscribe or withdraw consent at any time. It cannot be revoked by unchecking a box. And remember, what we've received quite often whenever we've bought something or we receive a solicitation, quite often you have that little checkbox that's already checked saying, yes, I want to receive. That can't happen anymore. You need to review all of your email type of communications and make sure you do not have that anymore. That'll be a red flag right there. It has to be an opt-in system, so somebody either has to check a box saying, yes, I want, or type in an email address saying, please send me this information to this address. Now, one thing that's in our favor is that express consent does not expire. There's no expiry date, unlike what we actually have right now. There's two methods that you can use. You can have a mailing list sign-up form on your website, or you can use a confirmation link in an email. But in order to send that email address out, they have to ask for it first before you can send the email out. Now, for opt-in, a lot of companies have started using what's called a double opt-in method. So perhaps on your website you have, please, a sign-up form saying sign up, receive my newsletter, receive my information that we'll send you occasionally. And when the person comes in, they check the box or they put in their email address, then automatically another email is sent out with a link that you have to click on, and that verifies that yes, indeed, you have made express consent, or that person made an express consent to receive your emails. There's another type of consent called implied consent, and this is a little bit more relaxed, but there's time limits on this. First of all, can you demonstrate a prior business relationship? Can you demonstrate that you've already known this person, that you have had a relationship with them in a business sense, and that you want to continue it, they're okay with this? You don't have to have express consent for that necessarily. So if there's been a sale or contract within the last 2 years, and every sale will reset this 2-year clock, or an inquiry made within the last 6 months of your products or services. Also, can you demonstrate a prior non-business relationship? That would be an association with a registered charity, a school, a political party, such as being, where you're being a donor or a volunteer, say. Now, another aspect of this is, did the recipient disclose their email or social media address to you? This is called the business card exemption or consent. So you meet at a networking event, you trade business cards, you talk about communicating with each other. That's considered to be implied consent. So it is actually okay on a personal basis to do this. Did they conspicuously publish their email address? And this is very interesting. So if somebody puts their email address on their website or through social media, and your message is relevant to that person's business, you can send them a solicitation email. One thing you do have to be careful of is make sure they do not have a statement on their website or social media that they do not want to receive solicitations. So you do need to actually check this out before you do this. So you have a certain amount of ability to still make these connections with people. It's not quite as cut and dried as with express consent. So there's a little bit of leeway now. Now, if you have an existing contact up to July 1st of 2014, you can use your existing contacts for up to 3 years, not just the 6-month and 2-year limits. You must already have been emailing them when that July 1st date passes to get into this 3-year category. You must be able to show that you have consent, either explicit or implied. So you have to track this. You have to keep paper, email, or phone records. And once somebody has given you an opt-out, you cannot contact them again, even to send them a confirming email. You just have to take them off your list and don't contact them. So this is the part that you need to do in case there's an audit. I've talked to the Better Business Bureau on what they've done, even though they're considered more of a charitable organization, is they're actually recording all their phone messages in order to verify that they have consent, express consent, of their potential customers and clients in order to be able to continue to contact them. There's another situation called a third-party referral. So say I'm an investment advisor and I know somebody, one of my clients, that I want to set up with one of my good friends who has a business that would be helpful to them. It is actually okay to make a referral with somebody you already have a relationship with. The person receiving the referral can send one commercial electronic message. It must include your name as the referrer. And if the recipient opts out, then that info has to go entirely along the chain, this referral chain, however long this is. And everybody has to be aware of that opt-out. So, what's the process? How do you manage this? First of all, you perform an audit of your current process, your current email or social media solicitation process. If you don't make solicitations, you're fine. Don't worry about it. Just make sure that you don't stray into that area. Now, do you have a process to obtain consent? So, again, you need to check things out. If you don't have a process, you need to set one up. You need to set this up with your database so that you don't make mistakes. Do you have an opt-in process for people to ask for your solicitations? And make sure it's an opt-in and not an opt-out process. Do you have a simple and active opt-out process? You can't just say, I'm going to take you off the list and then not do it. That's a red flag there. And are you keeping records of the responses? The burden of proof is on you. If you're audited, you need to show that you've kept the records, and you have to keep these records for at least 2 years. Purge your email list of all non-responders. If there's anybody who's opted out, if there's anybody that you've tried to obtain express consent from and they haven't responded, unless you can put this under the implied response category, you need to stop emailing with your solicitations. So, will it be effective? Who knows? One thing that we already have effective spam blockers. I get very little spam personally. Will it really target the spammers, the active spammers? You know, a lot of the active spammers are outside the country. How, will we be able to prevent that from happening? And is it too complex? It's a pretty complex system. There's a lot of very specific regulations there in it. And it's easy when they do this, it's easy to be not in compliance just because of the complexity. So we will see. Once July 1st hits, it goes into effect, and we need to be ready to deal with it. Now, I have some resources here, some things where I've taken some of the information that I've taken. There's some, the government has a lot of information on their websites. Vigorate Digital website, Elite Email has a survival guide. I do have these links and downloads that I can send to people. So if anybody wants, please email me at alchemistlarry@gmail.com, and I will send you a package with all this information in it. And I do thank you. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for watching and listening to me. And I'm happy to talk to people about any questions that you have at this point.
Wow. My head is just spinning.
Yeah, it's a lot. I told you it was a little dry, a little much, but it's, basically you have express and implied consent. You need to make sure that people opt in rather than opt out. Most of us aren't that sophisticated. Most of us little people aren't all that sophisticated with our emails, but you still have to make sure. I use MailChimp, and they're already in compliance with all this stuff. But if you use a private party, they may not be aware, especially if they're not in Canada. They may not be aware of what the Canadian regulations say. So and check your mail list. Make sure you don't accidentally use a wrong email list when you send out solicitation messages.
So I have 1,000 questions.
Have at it.
Well, let's see. First of all, I found your statistics on the email marketing really quite interesting. That 70% of email is spam. Wow.
Well, it used to be 90%. It's actually been declining slowly over the last 5 years or so.
Wow. So, and just speaking about just our email inbox in general, one thing that I've discovered is, because I use Gmail, Google has a great way of sorting out the incoming messages, so that there is a junk mail place where things go, and then there are some other sections. One of them being labeled promotions, which I'm thinking, given what you've just outlined, that maybe that portion of the inbox, maybe there shouldn't be anything in there other than things that I have actually opted in for.
And that's what supposedly will happen, is things that you have actually agreed that you want to receive.
Yeah.
A lot of companies will be sending out requests for you to re-sign up for things just to make sure that they have your express consent. But and that's one of the questions: is this really necessary, considering where technology is right now? Does it really matter? And really, for most people, I think many of us have this under control. Occasionally, one sneaks through the gauntlet that Google provides, but I'm not personally sure that this is necessary, but it is the law. And if you send solicitations out, you need to make sure you're complying.
Well, and as you say, it feels like legislation that was developed for the way things were 2 years ago, as opposed to the way things are today.
It was passed in 2010.
Yeah.
This legislation is actually 4 years old, and now it's being implemented because it was phased in very slowly.
Yeah.
And there's still phases. The 3 years out, we're still going to be coming in.
So that's interesting. But the other thing that popped into my head as you were going through, and boy, by the way, I sure would like to have access to your presentation, because sure. I know that I didn't absorb all of it. I scratched out a few little notes to myself, etc. But if I were going to do a real honest-to-goodness audit, I really need to go through all of those points one by one. So I'm wondering, Larry, if there's a way that we could put a link to your presentation right on the event page here, so that when people come and listen to this presentation, that they can actually access that presentation. Do you think that could be done?
So, yeah, I'm not sure technically how to put a PowerPoint presentation on the site, but certainly this presentation will have.
Yeah.
If we have, this copy of the presentation, we'll have it.
Well, maybe we could talk about that offline. I've got some ideas about how that could be done.
Okay.
Right on. So the other thing that popped for me was, so that in a kind of a way, I mean, we're talking about solicitations. So that really doesn't apply to blogs, for example.
No, and that's what they say, that if it's sort of a mass broadcast sort of thing, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think you just need to be careful and not start straying into that solicitation category.
Mm-hmm.
Start asking people to buy things in some fashion.
Well, sometimes a blog post can have a little element of solicitation. So I really appreciated those two examples that you gave. That gives a sort of a sense of what is okay.
Yeah.
Because certainly I know that a number of blog posts that I've sent out in the past did have little
Sure.
bits like that.
So if that's not the purpose of your post,
right,
then it's okay. But if all your post is just basically a solicitation with a little bit of other stuff, then you should rethink that.
Yeah. And I found it really interesting that charities and political parties were exempted from all of this.
Mm-hmm. Well, initially they weren't. That they were going to have to comply, but some cooler heads prevailed, and they decided that there was reason for allowing them exemptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I was thinking more along the lines of charities, because I sit on the board of directors of a local charity here, and we've just I mean, at one time we sent out mail solicitations, and we've just moved over to electronic solicitations within the last 6 months or so. So and it has been way more effective, actually.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
But you should still comply with how you send them out. Make sure that you have proper identification.
Yeah.
It should be an opt-in process, not an opt-out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but this business of must have documented consent before you send out a message. So, I mean, we need to pay attention to how we set up our invitations to opt in. Give your email address to receive this free whatever, and so maybe there needs to be some kind of more detail in that invitation to opt in.
It needs to be transparent. People need to know that they're opting into a process where they will potentially be receiving solicitation.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a big change, but you need to make sure that you're obeying the letter of the law here, minimum. You do have to have identifying information. People do have to be able to contact you in some way, and they need to be able to opt out.
Well, identifying information that you mentioned, I noticed there that you must have your name and your physical address, and was it and URL and telephone number?
You need to have a second means of contacting the person.
So it's and.
Plus either an URL, a phone number, email address.
So one of the this jumped out at me loudly and clearly, that especially in terms of solo entrepreneurs who work out of a home office, and I noticed that when you visit people's websites, especially solo entrepreneurs' websites, they usually don't have an address on there because they don't want to put their home address.
Of course not.
And I noticed the same about business cards. Most people, most solo entrepreneurs, do not put a business address.
Yeah. Well, business, there's nothing that talks about business cards, changing how we do that.
No, but
I agree.
Kind of go together in my head.
Yeah. So it does provide an issue for privacy too, for a person. Right. So how do we balance that? You know, if it's a corporation, that's a little easier because you can have a corporate address. Yeah. I believe it does say a post office box is okay.
Yeah.
But that's an extra expense.
Yes.
As well. And many small entrepreneurs don't have enough money to be spending, you know, so many dollars for things just for a purpose like that.
Yeah. So I might share here that that's something that when I moved to where I currently live, at one time I lived in an apartment block where the security was very tight, and so I had no problem giving my physical address. But when I moved to where I am now, it's in a house, and therefore I was unwilling to be able to put a physical address. So that's the very first thing I did, was I went to the local pharmacy down locally and took out a post office box, so that you know, I would be able to do that. And that cost me $150 a year.
Yeah.
So, however, it's deductible. So that's, to me, that's for solo entrepreneurs, that is something that they really need to pay attention to.
Yep. That's a really good point.
Yeah. Let's see, what else? This whole concept of implied consent. I mean, that information went by so quickly, I'm not sure I got it all. So if somebody gives me a business card that has their email address on it, and I choose to send them an email.
Yep.
Now, chances are I wouldn't send them a sales email to begin with anyway, because that doesn't fit the sales process very well. But you did mention that you can introduce people and you can refer people and do things of that nature. So, and I guess if you put if you've got a website, and most of us now do not put an email address up on our websites. We have a contact. We have a little form that the person fills in, and it sends an anonymous, like an email to us. So we don't give the email address on our websites, because we discovered that those were mined by spammers a long time ago. So, but yeah, I mean, there are a number of little subtle things in there that we really need to think through really, really clearly.
Yeah. So, you know, it's a lot of things thrown together, and it will take a little while for us to be able to sort through all these, and there will probably be some lawsuits and protests lodged about how this process works, and then over some period of time it will evolve into hopefully something workable that balances some of the onerous types of it. But you know, there is leeway for you to still continue to do networking and communicate with people, and to make solicitations to somebody that you've networked with. So.
Well, one other thing that popped into my mind is I use a plugin that goes with my Gmail called WiseStamp, And what that does is it allows you to, or it creates a, pardon me, it creates a signature, a visual signature that connects to all kinds of things. So it struck me as you were talking about this that I really need to go in and look at that and see whether there's anything in there that would not be in compliance. So little things like that that we need to pay attention to. So there was another question that arose in my mind, or an issue that arose in my mind. One of the things that I've noticed about my WordPress website is that a lot of spammers leave comments on your website. Like if you've posted something, they'll it's usually a blog. Yeah. And they'll go in and they'll post a comment that's just gibberish or that has a whole lot of sales talk and links back to somebody's website. Now, of course, one thing about those is that they have to be approved before they become live.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we do have some control over that, but I guess the other piece is that malicious, that malware thing that you were talking about. That often we get an email, it's got something inside it, a link of some sort inside it that could really do us harm if we don't pay attention to what we're doing.
Yeah. So there are those people who set up a fake website. So there's an email sent that says something like, well, we need to check your bank records and we need to get you to log into your bank, and you click on the link and it posts up a fake version of, say, your bank website.
Yeah.
If you click on it, then it's captured. It captures your keystrokes, or it may download some malware. And that's called phishing.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that people do. That's very explicitly outlawed in this. There are links that will download a virus or download an application, take over your computer. There's a particularly nasty one out there that will lock out your hard drive, so it's unreadable. It encrypts your hard drive, and you have to pay. Usually, it's some hundreds of dollars that you pay them to give you the encryptation code.
Oh God!
And there's no way of going around this. There's no way to decrypt your hard drive. So there's all kinds of nasty stuff out there. Whether this really reduces this or not, I don't know. A lot of these things come from Russia, from Turkey, from other parts of the world. Is this really going to prevent this from happening? It puts some teeth into it. It gives penalties, but they still have to be caught and they still have to be tried and fined, and whether that's effective, I don't know.
Well, and of course, so that points to the fact that we need to be wary and to pay attention. And I know that when I've received things like that, sometimes I'll copy that URL that's in the email, go over to Gmail and throw it in and see what happens, what comes up. And that's usually a clue. And of course, most of us know now that banks do not email us. No. That's something they just don't do. But one thing that I do religiously is that when I receive an email like that, I report it. I report the spam to Google.
Yeah, I do that too. If I suspect it, if it gets through my spam filters, then I'll report it.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that's something that's really important for us all to do when you get something like that, is to report it. So, but all of this kind of I've been doing a lot of thinking recently about where we are now with social networking and where we are now with our marketing, our online marketing activities. And so I mean, the more there's things that get locked down and so forth on, as far as email is concerned, it strikes me that the more people are going to be looking to things like social media for their marketing activities. And of course, the social media sites, Google or Facebook or any of them, they have some pretty stringent rules around what can be done and what can't be done. So, but this whole thing makes me think that many people will turn to social media more
Could be.
as part of their networking activities.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Oh, wow.
Big can of worms.
Just when I thought I had everything all nailed down, all the corners nailed down. And of course, when things like this pop up, it just does make us realize that we, as solo entrepreneurs, we really, really need to stay on top of the sort of current trends so that we really know what's happening or what could happen to us. So, Larry, I do thank you for the work that you've done on this, and hopefully you and I can sort of figure out a way to put a link to your presentation so that those people who are listening or will listen to this this presentation will be able to sort of look at it, because that's a lot of information.
Hopefully it was condensed down into something understandable. But yeah, it's a fair amount of info to put up.
Right.
And I looked at a lot of presentations that were online, and what a lot of them did was just take what the government has put out and just sort of put them on the slides and put the definitions of things, and what I found is it's so dry. It's so there's no real understanding of what it is. It's just one thing after another that it makes it even harder to really wade through all of this. So hopefully I've made some kind of translation of this that makes it a little bit more understandable to most people.
I believe you have. It's just for me it was just so much. I couldn't take it all in. I couldn't take enough of it in, I guess is what I was trying to say.
Well, it's hard to know what to leave out because all the little points there. There are a lot of little items to this that, if I leave one thing out, well, that may be what's important to somebody. Or if they don't do that, then, they won't be in compliance. So.
One thing that pops into my mind right now as we're talking about this is, like, I listen to the radio every day, several hours of radio, and I haven't heard a word about this on the radio.
It's not really being publicized. I saw the Chamber of Commerce is having a presentation about it. So there's one presentation that I'm aware of that's being sent out to the business world here in Victoria from the Victoria Chamber of Commerce. And even though it has the possibility of affecting many of our business lives here, people aren't really paying a lot of attention to it. People I've talked to have said, "Oh, well, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't apply to me. I don't really do solicitations. I don't." But the potential is that if the government takes a very strong-handed approach to this, or if people, it can be a situation where you just pissed off somebody, and they just decide they're going to make complaints, and it doesn't even matter whether you're doing whether you're soliciting or not. They made a complaint, and now you're in the system, and sometimes that's all it takes is somebody who is disgruntled and has a grudge. All of a sudden, you're being processed through this thing, and even though your intentions are good, you can inadvertently end up being pushed into a setup where you're fined, or you're being investigated, or your name is dragged through the mud. And it's better to be able to be operating in a position of knowledge, in a position of strength. And, you know, even if you decide you're not going to worry about it, at least know what you need to do so that you're aware of what the possibilities are. Because they set up some pretty severe consequences. I would imagine the largest fines will be reserved for, hopefully, the worst spammers. But that doesn't mean somebody little, a little guy, can't get caught up in this.
Yeah.
And you know, you send out 150 emails and they're done wrong because you weren't aware of it, or you just figured it wasn't a big deal, and all of a sudden you've got 100 times a $10,000 fine.
Whoa.
Or a $100 fine.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, it very quickly can add up, and that's where you want to be on the safe side in these things. I've dealt with government regulations. I was in the chemical industry for many years. I've been a safety manager, environmental manager, quality manager. I've had to deal with government regulations. And one thing I learned was, first of all, suspend your belief. Don't try to argue. Just try to learn what they're actually asking you to do, even if it makes absolutely no sense.
Right.
Just do it. And also know that you'll be unable to comply with all the regulations, because that oftentimes they contradict one another. So you just do the best you can. You muddle through, and you know, if you spend your time complaining about it, fine. You're just wasting time, and you know, nobody cares. Except it's fun to gripe about these things once in a while.
Well, it's a waste of psychological energy.
It is, you know, and you know, the government has its ways. It has its reasons for doing things, and you're not always privy to those reasons. So it may not make sense to you. It makes sense to somebody out east, you know, whatever. But you just have to comply and do the best you can.
Yeah. Well, I do thank you for expanding my understanding of all of this, and you could be sure I'll be doing some pretty careful audits over the next while. So I thank you for that. So now, Larry, before we close, is there anything that you would like to promote in terms of what you're up to in your business?
Well, thanks, Lola Ann. As a matter of fact, this Friday, the 20th of June, I will be talking at the Home Office Support Team host, and I'll be talking about the 5 Parts of Profit series that I've been starting up. And this part is on converting prospects into customers, or sales is what it is, that dreaded word, sales. And trying to help people to get an understanding of what sales is, and if you're not really that familiar with the process, and many of us aren't, you know, we're amateurs at this, right? Most of us have not had sales training. To get some information to people about what it is that, you know, about how we influence people. Because ultimately, as business people, we want people to buy our product, and we think that our product is worthwhile for people to buy. Because if you don't think it's worthwhile, it's sort of pointless. But if it's worthwhile for people to buy, then you should be asking people to buy it.
Right on. So I do look forward to your presentation at Host. And I might just mention that, as it turns out, I'll be doing the 5-minute spotlight speaker on the same day. And I'll be speaking about the fact that Google Plus is not a ghost town. So I'll be talking about that. And so it should be a very interesting host meeting, and we invite everyone to come along. So
I should probably tell people where and when it is.
Oh, of course. Yes. So this month, host is going to be on the 20th of this month. Normally it's on the second Friday of the month, but there was some reason it got pushed forward. So the 20th at 10 a.m. at Cedar Hill Golf Course. So yeah, and if you want to see more and to register to go, I think if you just do www.host-victoria.org, I believe it is, that'll take you to the meetup site. So I think it's time for us to close, Larry, and thanks so much for all the work that you've done around this and your presentation. And we'll see everyone at Being Your Own CEO next Tuesday at the same time, 9 a.m.
Thanks,
So
Lowell.
thanks and bye. This is Lowell Ann just signing off.